Charlie's Angels may be one of the most early 2000s things I can think of, a cluster of references and homages that many consider a fun, if not pulpy, duology of action movies that only really takes after its namesake and title. That said, I really adore these movies, and circles devoted to it aren't hard to find, especially in the wake of the 2019 remake directed by Elizabeth Banks. How that movie measures up compared to its predecessors isn't something I have time to set to music right now. But one of the biggest contrasts that drew criticism came in form of the wardrobe choices for the 2019 Angels, who present a worn-down, almost rugged aesthetic compared to the flashiness of their 2000 counterparts. Visual flair is undeniably one of the cherries atop the sundae that was McGee's Charlie's Angels, and it's absolutely valid enough on its own to say it's disappointing to see these iconic outfits removed in exchange for what looks like the product of thrifting. But rewatching these older movies, I was taken in by how much the costume choices spoke to the characters of the 2000 Angels, and how that builds the appeal of these movies as tributes to various corners of pop culture and how we interact with it. One of the first things they teach you in theater school is the importance of decorum, the visuals used to communicate the physical setting of a piece as well as the characters. There are a million ways costumes can speak to a character, and Charlie's Angels utilizes this in spades. It doesn't create a plot that's wildly intricate, but these characters are a delight to peel back and learn about, which is an impressive task considering these movies progress at breakneck pace, to the point that it took me multiple whim-sourced rewatches to really appreciate it. Both Charlie's Angels movies open with a montage of the titular lady's younger years, and you learn the archetypes they sort of tidily fit into. Natalie is the wild card, Alex is the affluent prodigy, and Dylan is the edge lady. But what appears at first glance to be a cute way to present some backstory, I actually found essential to informing all three characters, starting with Natalie, who we see was something of an oddball in her formative years, and in the present she's also something of a ditz at first glance, who uses amorousness for intel, speaking to relevant men almost exclusively in double entendre. It's easy to write her off as someone who isn't smart, but uses her looks as an asset instead, but this isn't remotely the case. It's Natalie who catches on to the most subtle clues involved in the mission. She's actually rather intelligent. Scoot backwards to the intro montage, during which we see Natalie is a Jeopardy champion, which requires a vast knowledge of the cerebral, academic, and cultural, precisely the breadth of knowledge that lends itself to the esoteric riddles Natalie solves almost single-handedly. Tie all of this with Natalie's decorum, a mermaid tattoo which matches the print on her surfboard. Mermaids and sirens being mythical creatures who use their beauty and voice to lure ill-fated sailors to their deaths, just as Natalie uses her facade as a blonde airhead to get information from her team's opposition. What speaks to this even more so is the fact that Natalie has a clear penchant for animals, seen in her intro snippets and followed up upon multiple times in the movies, including gathering evidence by inspecting the leavings of a bird, maybe the least sexy thing someone can do. Natalie isn't the steamy siren she presents to her opposition. She likes to ride mechanical bulls, inspect animal feces, and settle down with puppies and Luke Wilson. Connect that in turn with Natalie's fashion choices, putting flowers in her hair, suggesting a naturalistic vibe, as well as a lot of clothing choices with fringe edges and tied-off knots, common choices among people who work with animals as measures to quickly allow an article to alleviate the oppressive heat of the outdoors. From those small details we can already glean such a different and important interpretation of this character, bolstered by the details of her decorum, that Natalie may use her looks to bewilder and disarm her opposition, but she's incredibly brainy and would almost definitely rather be surrounded by smelly animals than any number of muscular men. On a more straightforward but still relevant note is Dylan, who's almost always decked out in some kind of rock band t-shirt, to the point that she's seen wearing an outfit inspired by David Bowie during her career as a costumed wrestler. Rock and roll being the epitome of counterculture, it's no surprise that Dylan rolled with a bad crowd. Her former romance with the Irish mob boss Seamus O'Grady coming back to bite her, being a pivotal point in the second movie in which she has to rely on a former foe, the Thin Man, to save her. Dylan's story is one of losing trust in herself because she feels she's endangered her team, but learning that help can come from odd places, including herself. And the independent lone wolf guitar riffs of the concert she sports embody that. Diverging from the normal, if not accepted, is what Dylan is all about. Alex, on the other hand, grew up with hobbies that positioned her beneath great scrutiny, representing her wealthy family in public events, which translates to her arc of keeping her double life as a private detective under wraps from her loved ones, not wanting to disappoint them. Note that her decorum consists of choices that call for delicate tact and center gravity, like bamboo platform wedges and props that could hurt someone in less careful hands, like whips. She's not only the calm, serene, and stern angel in personality, but even in her casual decorum choices, she challenges herself and lives beneath high expectations, which she learns to relieve herself of as she opens up to her father and fiancé. The way the angels all dress and handle their respective decorum tell their stories, and I feel here more than most movies it reflects how we tell our own stories using our own decorum, so to speak. We use clothes to communicate our interests, jobs, and lives as shorthand to introduce details about ourselves we want people to know, exactly how a director and wardrobe representative do the same using costuming and paraphernalia with every character they handle. The same choices that tell of the characters of these films are the choices I make when I wear a Yu Yu Hakusho t-shirt in public, which illustrates I'm a cool guy. And just as much as people using clothing and accessories to express themselves, they use art to do the same. Looking at a personally involved piece of art is a portal to one's soul, and in some cases a gallery of the art that inspired them, which one can dissect by observing every piece of media said art makes reference to. I gas on a lot about how a reference or allusion should speak to its home piece of art in some way, as opposed to standing on its own, a notion Charlie's Angels achieves in spades. I think creators such as Hirohiko Araki, who's very open about what inspires his myriad of characters in his manga JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and how these characters not only illustrate what was on Araki's mind at the time, but bolster themselves by enhancing the concepts within the context of the story. McGee's Angels movies are heavily referential and packed with a memorable soundtrack, sometimes borrowing directly from other films, whether it's tracks from Born Free, when Natalie is dealing with animals, or the famous motif from Cape Fear, playing over the vengeful prison escapee Seamus. The villains of the first film are accompanied by Pharaoh Monk's Simon Says, which samples heavily from the original theme of Godzilla, all of which are cues I would demonstrate now if copyright wouldn't prevent me. One would think that musical cues so nearly hypertextual would be detrimental, as music choice with on-the-nose lyrics in film is a fine line to tread, as is heavy artistic illusion for similar reasons. The catch, however, is that it suits Charlie's Angels extraordinarily well because these movies are basically feature-length references. This is a remake of a property from the 70s and it pays homage to its roots, but heavily utilizes music, iconography, and paraphernalia of its own contemporary, as if to broadly illustrate exactly what art and media is being married to the original show to create the work of art we see today. And whether it's Dylan's concert tease, Natalie's game show prowess, or Alex's love life with pulpy action stars, these references seamlessly blend into the film's narrative and character decorum to help illustrate these personalities and stories vividly. What I mean is, this is a movie, decorum, and character arc that could only exist with these specific ingredients in the year 2000, and there's a very distinct appeal to that. The 2000 Charlie's Angels movies are a union of every fixation and artwork its characters had their hands on up to that point, and it serves that role ascendantly.